Hi, everybody. Recording now. So I'm Terry Runyan. This is Mary Schiller, author and coach. And this is the fourth in a series of conversations called Creative Conversations. And we're exploring the bigger picture in art and life. This particular call, we were going to explore whether creative blocks really exist. And welcome to everyone, whether you're catching this now or on the replay. So Mary, did you want to talk a little bit about yourself and why this topic was of interest to you?
Sure. So, hi there, I'm Mary. And one of the reasons I am really interested in this topic is because my whole profession has been based in something that people often talk about in terms of blocks, meaning I have been a professional writer since 1993. So I've basically made my living almost entirely from writing for all that time. And writer's block seems like a real thing to people. And I have always been kind of fascinated by that because I've never experienced it. Is that weird? And so when we were talking, Terry and I, about creative blocks, I just thought that would be really interesting to look at and to see, have I experienced them in other areas and I've not been really paying attention, and, maybe I have. And I know Terry has been a professional artist for a long time. And so I wondered if she had had that experience before of feeling sort of blocked in some way or not. And then we thought it'd be fun to talk to other people who were interested in that to see if this is actually a real thing or if it's kind of not, maybe. And if, it's possible to be creative on demand, just like that whenever we need it. So that's kind of where this came from.
That's great, Mary.
Hey, Matsui, I just saw you down there. I may be seeing you in person soon. I better. I'm going to Tokyo in January, so I want to see Matsui in person. All right.
So yeah, we're in the moment now, creating as we go. So yeah, as far as my background goes, I have always in the past thought that creative blocks were a thing, that actually was a thing that happened, and I was experiencing it, so it was true. And all the artists I know in my life, and I was at Hallmark for 30 years with a bunch of artists, and everyone there believes in the creative block as well. Mm-hmm. And that, we go through these ebbs and flows of creativity, and sometimes it's flowing and sometimes it just feels completely like we cannot make it happen, right? We're just trying to find it and it's not there. So we label that creative block. And recently, like in the last year and a half, maybe a little longer than that, I've been exploring what that means and whether it's actually possible. So I've been actually working with Mary as a coach, and we're exploring together the bigger picture around this and everything else. So this is kind of looking at this idea of creative blocks from a whole new perspective. We're going to come at it from a different direction. We're going to explore that bigger picture around creative blocks. So we're going to have this conversation open to questions. If you want to raise your hand, there's a hand raising function. If you click on participants below at the very bottom of your screen, it'll come up with a box, and at the bottom of that, there's a place where you can raise your hand to ask a question. There's also a chat box if you prefer to stay off camera or don't want to speak, that you can post a question there as well. So I'm going to send it back to Mary to talk a little bit more about her ideas around this. And
yeah, thanks, Terry. And anytime you guys want to jump in, just raise your hand or wave, at the camera or whatever, and we'll happily chat. I think that the bigger picture that Terry is talking about has been really interesting for me to look at in terms of creativity and the way that things kind of come into being, whether it's, it can be anything. In this context, we're looking at things that one might call traditionally creative, like drawings or paintings or writing or something like that, or music or, photography, whatever it is. And I think that what has been interesting for me to look at is the notion that, people often use this phrase, well, I'm just not in the flow, it's just not flowing, right? And I started to look at that from kind of a critical perspective and going, is it really possible to ever be out of the flow? Is that really possible? And the more I have looked at that over the last few years, the more it looks to me like it simply is not possible to be out of the flow. Because what does that actually mean? Does that mean we're not in the flow of life somehow? Does it mean that we're not in the creative flow? And if you really start to look at what is happening with us humans all the time, things are always being created through us, whether we're conscious of it or not. Like this conversation is being created with all of us here. So that to me is an indication that we're all in this creative flow. And I started to look at things kind of from that standpoint and going, if I wasn't in the flow, where exactly would I be? And that was a question that I couldn't answer after a while. I was like, I can't see where else I would be if I weren't in the flow of this creative force that's kind of driving everything that is going on in life. And that just seemed to be more like a discussion of what we actually are as humans. This creative flow is us. It's not something that we have to kind of sit in one place and wait for. I got to wait for the creative inspiration to come. No, it seems like it's just always there. And we can kind of dip into it in a conscious way, in any way that we want to, anytime that we want to. So that is how it has started to look to me. Before I kind of came across this new way of seeing things, it was more like my experience of it, I guess I would say, was more like I had a lot of evidence to show me that a creative block wasn't a real thing. Because if I was given a project to do and was told you have 30 minutes to write copy for this ad, I would get it done. And I thought, okay, well, I can clearly be creative on demand. So it never really looked to me like that was a real thing. Or, we would have projects sometimes where, they'd say, okay, we just heard back from the client and they're coming by in 10 minutes and they need 3 new ideas. You have 10 minutes to come up with 3 new ideas. Boom, boom, boom. I'd have 3 new ideas and I would go, wow, that wasn't so hard. Or when I was working at a newspaper, I first worked on the copy desk. So I was one of the copy editors. So I was reading the stories and writing the headlines. And we had a deadline, like the paper had to get out at a certain time. So, back in those days, this was pre fancy computers. We were using those things that looked like they were out of, George Jetson somehow. But, we had to count the spaces. So I had to count the letters in the headline and they had to come up with a certain number of letters. And I literally would have sometimes 60 seconds to come up with a headline for the story. And yet it would still appear. So I kind of was looking back at my whole lifespan, in terms of creative output. And I started to think, I don't really know that this is a real thing. Because if anyone is ever put on the spot in any situation, I don't mean just a quote unquote creative one, but in anything, you can come up with answers. You can come up with new ideas. You can come up with solutions in an instant. So yeah, I think I will kind of leave that there and see what you guys think and see if Terry has anything she wants to add.
I'm curious about that, Mary, because you're speaking about that moment by moment experience again. It's like right now, I have to come up with something to say. And I'm not coming up with it. It's just coming out. So when there appears to be some time involved in my desire or request to create, and I have time to think about it and, really give it a lot of contemplation and stuff, that appears to me to be the time when those seeming blocks appear. And the only difference is I have a lot of thinking going on between the actual act of creating and where I'm sitting at the moment. So in a situation when we're asked, like right now, I'm going to be talking, right? I can't sit there and think about talking, right? Because I'll probably talk myself out of talking and get all nervous and self-conscious.
And then this would be really boring.
And then I'd be creatively blocked. Okay. So that isn't in my awareness as something to do. I'm just moving forward in the moment. So with creativity, the only thing I see as what appears to be a block is whatever we're coming up with in the moment as something not that's stopping us in the moment. We're distracted by it, an idea that it's possible that we could be blocked. That, you know, we're not actually blocked, but we think we are. So, you know, the realization for me right now that I am having a thought that I'm blocked, and that's the only thing that's creating a sensation of being blocked, has freed me from having to go down the road of making something out of that thought that just went through. And then I'm open again. So
do you think there's also something in there about like a judgmental type thought that comes in sometimes?
Oh yeah.
That says, oh, this is awful. You know, you can't put that out there, Mary, because I hear that kind of stuff frequently in my head. It's just these days I don't really pay attention to it because I've heard it so many times. I mean, that's simply what happens during this process.
I don't think there's ever a time I've done a piece of artwork or been working on one where I don't have a slew of thinking about it that says, oh, you've really screwed up this time, Terry, or just throw it out, start over. There's all kinds of stuff that goes through like that.
Yeah.
The only difference is, and I'm feeling it too when it's coming through, right? Because we're feeling our thoughts. The only difference is I'm seeing it for what it is in the moment, and I continue with what I'm doing, what's being created. There's no actual block going on. There's no, that thought is not real. It's not me. I can see it for what it is.
So you're not giving those kinds of thoughts any weight?
Well, they just don't have any. They're not saying anything about what's true. I kind of look at it like we all seem to have a bag full of ideas about ourselves that we picked up somewhere along the way that like to be chucked up into our consciousness whenever we're doing anything. And we, at some point, at least I did, I believed him. Whenever one was put in front of me, I was believing it. And I thought I had to get to the bottom of it. And I thought I had to do something about it and go to therapy and had to take antidepressants and everything else around it. And since I've realized that it's a bag of things that have been made up that have nothing to do with who I am and who anyone is, it's much easier for me to see it as the bag that it is. You know, like that. There's no, I don't need to do anything with it. I can, as you say, disregard it because, I mean, sometimes I'll look at it just in curiosity around it. It's a creative thing too. It's like amazing what our thinking does. I mean, like all the spiraling and craziness or what seems logical, and all that's creative as well. And it's flowing through, and who we are is the awareness of that flowing through. You know, we're still in this creative energy. We are this creative energy, and we're not attaching ourselves to these fleeting thoughts and experiences in the moment. We're just present with what we're doing. So I kind of was coming up with that analogy of the ocean again. The ocean is, you know, the creativity, and the waves. The ocean isn't bothered by the waves. They're going through the consciousness of the ocean, but there's no stopping or the ocean thinking it's less than or blocked or because of waves.
Yeah. And I think that also, I mean, I think what's important to see with that analogy too is that the waves are never going to stop. Okay, that is never going to go away. And yet the creative force is still present and still doing its thing. That's never going to go away either. So I'm much more interested in diving into the ocean part and seeing what's in there, rather than paying attention to the surface experience that's kind of repetitive. You know, I could pretty much dictate what goes through my mind. Like I could share the exact words with you that go through my mind anytime I sit down to write something. It's almost exactly the same every single time. And it's kind of like, yeah, I heard that about a million times now. I know what it's saying. I'd rather, focus my conscious attention on, the real thing. And that doesn't look real anymore. It almost sounds like a robot or something in my head, those thoughts. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Remember if you ever watched the Peanuts cartoons, that the teacher won't. It's kind of like that. It's just like nothing at all worth listening to. Oh, Nyla's got her hand up.
Nyla.
Hi, Nyla.
Hi. I'm just listening to you girls, and I know when there has been times when I've heard that kind of talk and it's driven me nuts because it's like, yeah, you guys can see it. I can't see it. I want to be where you are. I'm not there, kind of thing. And what I've seen when I've had the blocks is that they have felt so real at the time that you do not see it as thought. So while it's so real to you, it feels, like you can't get past it. But what has helped me to loosen some of that thinking has been to see the thought that have held them in place. So for example, when I would do something, I would think that it defined me, or it showed my worth, or my value, or my level of knowing, or my level of expertise, or whatever. I had so much on it that it was really hard to get past that. It was like a gatekeeper. The thoughts were these gatekeepers, and I couldn't get through. But when I started to see them, how that wasn't true, it didn't help me to know it was my thinking, because I had too many beliefs that it was telling the truth about me. And so it took me a long time to see it as like, if I would get stuck or I wouldn't know what to say, I'd be like, well, that's because I don't know enough. And I need to learn more. So I would listen to audios, I would listen and try harder, thinking that I would get to a place where I wouldn't not know. So, there was like these clusters of thoughts that I would go around in. But now when I see that I look at that thought and I see, well, that's not true. That I don't have, what I do doesn't define me, doesn't tell people about me and my worth or my value. Then it's like, okay then. And then those thoughts can come and they don't hijack my mind. But, and the less thinking, obviously, you do have, the more your creativity flows, because the creativity is always flowing, except for the thinking that comes in the way. But when it feels real, then it doesn't feel like creativity flows.
Yeah, thanks, Nyla. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Would you say somebody like Vincent van Gogh had a lot of thinking or not a lot of thinking? Based on what we know about him.
I imagine he probably had a fair amount of thinking, which he didn't empower. And he got on with it and did it. And we don't know when he had really bad days, when he wouldn't get out of bed and didn't do anything, because we don't know. Yeah, we don't know.
Because he strikes me as somebody who was having a pretty horrific experience of life in a lot of ways. Like, just because, of everything we know about him. So I think the one thing that I would say maybe differently is that thinking can't get in the way of creativity. That isn't actually possible, because we're constantly in a creative state. So I think that, you know,
I'm gonna disagree with you, because I think thinking can get in the way. If I want to create and I have a lot of insecure, doubtful thinking, and that thinking feels real to me, and I believe that to be true, I will not, my creativity won't be able to come out, because I am under the influence of all that thinking. So it's not that the power and the source isn't working, but I am so believing the thinking that I am, that I can't be creative. I've lived this life, so I mean, I'm not saying it from a, now when I haven't got anything on it and I can see it as my thinking, the creativity that was already flowing has a chance to come out. But when I think that thinking that I'm having is really real, it's telling me about my lack of capabilities or my lack of whatever, I am not in a creative place, because I am under the influence of that.
Is it possible that it's still working and you're not aware of it?
Absolutely. I think I'm in agreement with you. I think the creative life force is always working. The tap is always on. So it's not that I can block that. That doesn't work. It's not a pipe that I can plug up. It's gonna always be flowing. But the plugging will come when I've got thinking that feels very real to me. And though the pipe is still flowing, it can't flow because I won't allow it to flow because of the thinking that feels real.
So do the waves have the power to stop the ocean from doing its thing?
I don't think the waves have the power to stop the ocean, but if I'm in the sea and I'm scared of the waves, I can't even see the ocean. I'm just frightened of the waves.
So it looks to me, though, like we don't always know what's going on. We're not always consciously aware of what this creative force is actually doing. So we might be looking at a bunch of thinking and have no real sense of what is actually occurring. So from where I'm sitting, it would be like saying that the clouds have the ability to stop the sky from being present and doing its thing. Because to me, thoughts do not look powerful in that way. They create an experience, but they can't stop us from doing something as a being. That doesn't look real to me.
I think we're saying the same thing. It's only when the reality of those thoughts feels so real that you don't know that they're your thoughts.
I had that for years, though. I had thinking all day long when I was writing professionally, and I was still doing it. So I think we can all point to examples of times when we've had a ton of thinking going on, but we've still created whatever what we want to, or at least done something.
Yeah, I'm not saying that even in a bad place you can't create, or in a fearful or insecure place. I'm not saying you can't create from that place. Still, it's possible. I'm not saying that. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just saying that, when the thinking feels real, then it's harder. And yeah, you've been a journalist, or you've had deadlines and you've got used to, performing that way. Somebody who hasn't been a journalist and not had to perform in that way may not necessarily have the same skill set as you. So it doesn't, we live in separate realities of how we function. So I think there's examples of creativity when that situation is tough. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm just saying that the more we see that the beliefs and the thinking is not real, then what is already working just flourishes. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Nyla.
I might have a little something around that. I'm not sure, because if creativity happens, it'll happen right now. So, what my experience is what Mary is pointing at, from what I'm seeing, is there's always pointing back at this knowing of who we are in the moment. That I know I tend to go back and back to this moment of experience. We have memories of things that happened in the past that were distracting for us, and we were caught up in them, and we thought that we were in a block, or creativity wasn't even happening in that moment for us because we were busy thinking about something else. Even that right now we can see as a thought. Right now in the moment is happening. I'm present. Who I am is unchanged by all of it. Who I am is creativity. And I can contemplate in my thought a lot about the past and what's happened and thinking and all that stuff. But right now, who I am and who we all are is unchanged. We are creativity itself. And that life that we are is always present. There's no moment where it isn't. So even when we're in the conversation around how things look for us, how things have looked for us in maybe the past or even now, maybe we're listening to a lot of thinking around how, we're afraid to be on video, or we don't have any creativity. I don't have anything to say. I mean, I have just those thoughts right now. I mean, that's part of my repertoire. That it's not okay for me to be on camera. But what happens in the moment is I realize, wow, this is bigger than me and these thoughts that are going through. I mean, it's who I am is unchanged, or there's nothing, all the stuff that's going on the surface, these waves, have not touched or impacted in any way who I truly am. And this is just happening. It's like this creative energy is just happening. So it sort of unpacks the whole conversation, because I can even see, even if I have a point I want to argue in the moment, I can even see that going on. I got to be right about something. I got to prove something to you guys, or something like that. I can even see that going on right now and go, wow, that's amazing what I'm creating right now in this moment, in the middle of being perfectly okay. And it feels very real. All the fear that comes up, all the self-consciousness that comes up, it feels very real right now. And yet I know the truth is unimpacted by any of this. It's like, it just becomes a very interesting and curious ride where we're just like, wow, life is amazing. How much stuff, my bag of stuff that I bring along with me has to say about things. And it's very righteous, this bag of stuff. So, I can, it's just, have a lot more compassion and humor around the whole bag than I used to. And I see.
That's a good thing. Yeah. We have, there's an interesting comment from Mitz in the chat. Mitsui, do you want to look at that?
Yeah, go ahead and read that, Mary, if you will.
Mitsui said, being distraught is interrupting flow, ? Or is creating within during the interruption a part of the flow? Or is it more of an ebb and flow? What are your thoughts on showing up, whether you want to be there or not? I'm thinking of the maybe comment saying you have to show up first before the muse comes, or something like that. I thought that was pretty provocative. What do you think?
Well, I kind of look at this idea of showing up the same as I'm looking at the idea of creative blocks. We cannot be not, we can't not show up.
We're always here.
We're always here and now. And so the access to the muse, if you want to call it that, or just the fact of creativity itself, is always with us because it is us.
I also think that, and this a little bit goes back to, I think, what Nyla was talking about too, that we can sometimes have this preconceived idea of when something is supposed to happen or how it's supposed to happen. And if you kind of stop looking in that direction too, that really shifts things a lot. That, like, for example, I'm sitting here talking with you guys, but I may be writing a fantastic novel right now as well. That may be happening behind the scenes, and I'm not consciously aware of it. But, if I sit down at the computer with my dictation next week, that may start coming out. So it's always happening, even when it really doesn't look like it is. It's always going on, if that makes sense. So I don't really see it as an ebb and flow either. That was a good, I like the way you phrased that question, but that's how it looks to me.
I see we got another comment from Anna. Mary.
Oh, yes. Maybe it's that the creativity is always there because it's what we are, but that the thinking gets in the way of our awareness of our creativity. Now, that could be true. Not in the way of creativity itself, because as long as we exist, we are creative. I do think that that's possible. Like, I can get very distracted by the movie that I'm watching. Very distracted because it's really compelling sometimes. It's like a magnet, you know? So I think that's more of what I was trying to convey earlier and wasn't doing a very good job. So I appreciate that, Anna.
I know. I always like I agree with you, Anna, and Mary, that our thoughts and movies, and I have this television show I'm watching right now, a series that I'll watch binge on 3 or 4 of them at a time, and after I turn them off, the binge is still going on in my head. I'm like, I'm thinking, but then a bunch of thoughts come in and say, well, I need to stop watching that because I really don't want to tie up my thinking, creativity, ideas, or whatever in this show. And that's really curious to look at too. It's like everything that's going on right now in our thinking around whatever it is, whether it's distracting or not, even the thinking about thoughts being distracting is an opportunity to see the creativity and process. I mean, we're making it all up right now. Mm-hmm. You know, even this conversation, we're creating it as we go. So we're all in the flow always. Sometimes what appears in that flow looks like a bunch of thinking, but it's just, there's a way to be able to see that from knowing that, wow, it is amazing how much we create all the time.
Mm-hmm. Allie has a question. Okay. And then I see Maggie has her hand up too.
Hi. Gosh, I've just got so many thoughts running through my mind about this. I've just been sort of scanning my life, you know, because I've worked in kind of creative fields all my life, you know, as a film and television producer with a lot of deadlines. I was a script editor on a sitcom once, and we had to churn out a script every week, you know. I've had lots of writing jobs where I had deadlines also. Like you, Mary, you know, and when I think about it, because now I'm in a really different situation. Now when I write, it's completely up to me whether I write or not. And I haven't actually written my coaching newsletter for a year, you know. And so I'm thinking, what's the difference in that experience? Because I don't believe in creative blocks. There, I'll say it. I don't think it's true, you know. The only difference I can see is that now I'm just not sitting down and doing it. The thoughts were the same back then. The thinking has always been the same. The thinking that wanted to stop me or get in my way or distract me from it, you know. So that hasn't changed at all. So the idea that people who have had deadlines then become more disciplined people and it's easier for them, I don't think that's true. You know, what I do know is that I am always creative. I know that. And I'm very aware that the reasons I use now not to send a newsletter are not true. Like they might be, it's a cold day, I can't just sit still and write or something, you know, that meaningful, right? The other thing I notice is what you just said, Mary. You know, I got a newsletter from a coach recently who said, I haven't been able to send a newsletter for months because I've been blocked. However, it's been great because I started writing on my book, and I'm like, why do you have to call that a block? That's not a block. You just stopped wanting to write your newsletter because you wanted to write a book instead, you know? How can you say you're blocked and I've been writing a book?
Right. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, I know. There's a bit of a double think going on here, you know. But I don't know. I guess what I know is that I think what Anna said is really true about, you know, it's my awareness of my creativity that I sometimes will shelve. I know that when I sit down to write, I can write. I think any of us can. Mm-hmm. We absolutely have that within us. I know that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't really have a question. That was it.
Well, no, but what I was going to say was that I hear that a lot. Like people say, well, I want to do this, so why am I not doing it?
Yeah.
I want to create this, so why am I not? Well, my thinking is because you really don't want to.
That's the other
that's kind of
about the coach who didn't write a newsletter, and I've known that about myself too. You know, that for months and months I was like, I'm failing at this, and actually it was that I just didn't want to.
Yeah,
and
that's cool. That's totally cool.
Let ourselves off the hook, you know. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly opens up a lot more possibility when we give up the idea that there are particular things we need to be doing in order to be anything, you know, whether it's an artist. I mean, I'm doing this daily creating thing, and I will notice my thinking as the day goes on, you know, holy crap, I haven't done my art yet, you know, just like it starts to chime in. And it's just so silly. Eventually I get up and I go over and I create something. And I'm noticing that thinking now has nothing to do with whether or not I actually create something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not pressuring me into anything. It's not, all it's doing in the moment is creating some feelings that are not very comfortable. But the creative piece is already happening now. And when I move over towards a piece of paper and start painting, that'll be happening then. And all this thinking about it is just that. It isn't saying anything true. And even if I don't go create something, I'm still okay. I mean, no matter what, create something that's actually artwork, I'm still creating. The only suffering in that is my idea that it has to look a certain way, that it has to look like, if I do not do a daily creating a piece of artwork every day, that somehow means something about me. And that's a lot of thought too, that doesn't feel very good. So in that moment, I can realize, wow, I'm okay. And here's that thought. And it has nothing to do with anything about me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it just drops the whole idea that something needs to happen for me to be okay. I don't need to create anything to be okay. I'm already fine.
Yeah, and you're already creating all the time anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, there's some other stuff going on in the...
Let me go back over here.
Have you ever gotten Mary Helen?
I was looking at Sylvina. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Now I have a 6-month-old baby. My free time to create is really small. I think that's a boost for my creating process. In some ways, it kind of is, because, like we were saying before, I happen to find it really fun to see how quickly I can do something. You know, I think that's really exciting because it's like a really fun way to see this power that you and I are made of. You know, how fast could I create an email to send out? How fast could, Allie, how quickly if you set a timer for 10 minutes, could you write it and send it? You know, I do that kind of thing all the time. So I find that sort of fun too. Sorry, someone's calling me. Hang on a moment. Keep talking. I'm going to put myself on mute.
I can relate to that, Mary. I kind of looked at it a little differently. I was trying to stay ahead of all my thinking by moving quickly. It wasn't so much, I'm so curious about how fast I can do this. It was more like, I got to just start moving so my thinking will stop, that kind of thing.
You got to get ahead of it. Hurry up.
I was like on a treadmill in life. I was on this race. And I still catch myself. I was having a conversation with Joanne the other day. I catch myself like I'm making a salad with my partner, Larry. And I'm in a race to make this salad. Like we have a deadline of the salad being done, and then we're going to eat it and watch our show that we watch. Mm-hmm. And I catch myself cracking up. Like there's some thing to get to beyond the preparation in the moment of a salad. Yeah, so it can be applied to anything, whether it's appears to be creating a book or creating a piece of art or a salad. It's just curious when you start paying attention. We're always creating.
Always, yeah.
There's a comment back here from, let's see, Mary Helen Leal. Have you ever gotten depressed on a black, cloudy day? I want to say from my perspective, I can get depressed on any day if I, think about it enough and go down that road in my head around. I mean, I come from a background of a lot of depression and very up and down kind of emotional place. It didn't matter if it was cloudy or not. I was able to kind of like wallow in that and believe it and mess with it and try to figure it out and go down that road no matter what the weather. The same is true now with realizing that it doesn't matter what the weather is, or isn't that curious how if it gets gray out that I feel like I want to go take a nap. Is that really related to the grayness? I don't think so. I think I have some thinking around gray, dull, dark, gotta settle down, gotta go to sleep. And
yeah, my experience isn't really like that. I don't have any sort of history with depressive thinking really, or anything like that. So I really can't relate to that. Which seems strange, since some of you who know me, know that I was quote unquote mentally ill with a post-traumatic stress disorder, but I didn't have those kinds of experiences like that, Terry.
It's kind of the opposite of vigilance.
I was kind of like, oh my God, everybody's going to kill me. That was more my state.
So you didn't have to do it for yourself.
No.
You don't have to go down those roads of kind of taking yourself. No. But it's all the same thing. We're sort of caught up in ideas and thoughts about.
But here's the thing about that. Going back to Nyla's point, that's how I was for 30 years, from age 22 to 52. That whole time I was getting paid every day to be creative on the spot. And I was looking at life like everybody was out to literally kill me. So I don't really see any connection between any kind of thought that we have and this creative power that we are and that we can access and use. Because I was in that state of mind most of the time, and sometimes it was, even more acute when I was in a working situation for whatever reason. I don't really understand that, but yeah.
Do we have other questions over here, Mary?
And
don't forget to raise your hand over in the chat.
Yeah, Maggie's Maggie's waving.
Okay.
Hi,
Maggie.
Hi.
I love this question because I think what I do is I block myself before I get to the art. I have a lot of creative pursuits, and I tend to block myself before I even get to the table. At the time, I have elderly parents that need my help. I have, all these obligations always in the way. When I finally do sit down and start painting or, writing or whatever, the thoughts can come, and I kind of find them charming sometimes. It's like, they're humorous sometimes. They're very funny. But I don't really feel blocked once I get to the table. It's more, I block myself from getting to the table. Do you have anything to say about that? And I don't know. I mean, I look at my life is just really busy, and that is true. But you just said there's someone with a 6-month-old. That's pretty busy too. You can create no matter how busy you are. I think I'm using, somehow that's blocking me, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. Again, I think it comes back to maybe what we were saying with Allie, where it's just not something you really want to do right then. Like, I wouldn't make a big story around it. Exactly.
That's kind of how I see it too. Well, I'm always going to keep coming back to this moment. I mean, you're here. You want to be here. You have all the time in the world right now to be here. I mean, you do have time for what you really want to do. And sometimes it's taking care of your parents. Sometimes it's doing a painting or some writing or just sitting and enjoying nature or whatever it is.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I want to add to that. in my experience, where the quote unquote suffering comes from is when I think I have an agenda about it. Like I think what it is it's going to look like this, and this is what it has to look like, creating artwork or a writing or whatever it is, even getting on this call. And then something else comes up. My parents need me, whatever it is. There's a baby. And then I want to go do that in that moment. I mean, that is the next thing that's indicated for me to do. But then there's a lot of thoughts around, I must not want to do this other thing, when that's just something that will happen when it's the time for it to happen. And it could be that it won't happen. I mean, there are plenty of people out there that don't want to write or don't want to create art. They want to do other things. So the less I grip on to whatever it is my idea is that will prove that I'm a successful whatever, artist, writer, coach, then it can unfold naturally. I can kind of follow whatever it is in the moment that feels like the next thing. It's very spontaneous without all the heaviness around what it's supposed to look like.
I was just going to say, I think that's part of the problem is that I have an idea of how often I should create. If I'm an artist, I need to do, 9 to 5 every day, or I'm not an artist. And so there's a lot of judgments about what I should be doing, how often I should be. I do actually find myself at my art table a fair amount. It's just not as much as that predetermined amount in my head thinks it should be. Mm-hmm. And so I'm judging it. And I just realized that right now. The light bulb moment.
Yay. Joanne. Hi, Joanne.
Hi. Hey. This whole conversation reminds me of that quote, because I feel like it's the motto for my life. Whenever I feel the need to exercise, I lie down until it goes away. And I would say the one thing I've gained from talking about creativity within this context is, oh, isn't that creative? Like, I don't know. Like, to me, it's like, well, isn't what's going on all the time, like, what we are labeling creative? Like, it's all creative? Isn't that what we're doing here?
Yeah.
And so at one point it might be me painting these birds. The next point it might be me making supper. At the next point it might be me lying down because I had an urge to exercise and I wanted to go away. I don't know. But I would say I find that frustrating. Like that tagline, it's like, oh, I have an urge to create. Oh, I'm going to go do something else till that goes away. Well, that drives me nuts. And I don't know if there's anything to do about that. But and maybe it driving me nuts is also me being creative. I don't know. It just becomes a bit of a rabbit hole. I don't know if you have anything to help me.
I can add a little something in there. I have this sense of urge to create, right? What I've noticed, and I've talked about this before, is it's really useful for me to move on that moment in the instant it happens. Because the thing about creativity, that in my experience, is it's a flow. It doesn't stop, it's a movement. So as I move with whatever it is in the moment, that urge or whatever, and I move towards it, I still may have all kinds of stuff rattling around in my head around why I shouldn't do it, why I should go do what I really want to do is go lie down. But I'm still in a sense of, but now I have this other conversation going on, but that came in that moment. I'm going to go see what that's about. I'm just curious about it. Even though I have a bunch of comments around, well, I don't have to do this. I don't need to do anything to be okay. Okay, that's fine. And I'm really curious about this nudge. I'm just going to go see what happens. So that has always been helpful to me when I'm caught up. Like I use the example of, I've been the queen of researching about something. Like, oh, I'm going to paint a bird. I better go look on on some site and look at as many birds as possible, get the exact bird I want to paint. And as I'm looking, I'll have this sensation like, oh, and that sense of that would be cool. And then I go, oh, there must be something better. That's the immediate thought afterwards. I always have a sense of, I'm going to miss something if I don't keep looking. I got to do something better, or I got to do something, or I got to see what more there is. I can always come back to this. That is for me the kiss of death on that creative impulse. What I'm doing, it seems to be happening now, is when that thought comes that I need to keep looking, even when I'm right now feeling inspired to move in a direction, I go, well, that'll be there when I make my next thing, whatever's coming up in that researching, whatever looking I'm doing. I'm just going to move on this now. That has been a very cool thing for me to get just in motion with that sense of that desire, that quickening, that spark. Mm-hmm. So it's just it's kind of a shift. I'm dealing with the next thought of keep looking a different way, because I just so much appreciate the feeling in the first place that, wow, something's coming. And the other thing that happens too is sometimes I don't have anything coming and I just start painting, and then it comes. I mean, it happens. It's always happening. Mm-hmm. So whether or not I'm inspired before I act or I'm inspired during the act, it doesn't matter. And if I don't act, it's okay too. So there's no judgment about the actual, there's no judgment about the actual thing itself. Did you have anything else on that, Joanne?
I'm just reading what Mitsui wrote. How do you know that, that came versus the move to lie down? Which is the urge we go into motion with? Yeah, I think it's like the whole idea of we'll go with the first urge, but like I find this is a bit of a sticking point for my. You get an idea and then.
You're cutting it out a little bit, Joanne.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead and try again.
You know what? I'll just type. Okay. So I'll mute myself. So okay. Just go on.
This whole thing about whether I create a piece of art or go take a nap, just simplify it. There would be no problem with either decision if we didn't make it a problem. Mm-hmm. So the only quote unquote discomfort with any of the decisions we make is our idea about what should be made and what needs to happen in order to be okay. We all will get up and make ourselves a dinner. We all will breathe. We all might write something. We all get on this call. It's not like we have to make things happen, mm-hmm. Have this goal and then make it happen. It's already happening naturally. And whether it's a nap or a painting or a dinner or whatever it is, if we don't have a load of thinking about what it should be, we can be at peace in whatever it is we're doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mitsu?
So in this world, there's no regret? No?
No. Why would there be?
No mistakes?
No.
You can experience regret and mistakes in the moment and see it for what it is. It's something else creative going on. I'm making up this idea of mistakes and regrets.
Right. Exactly. That's cool. Yeah.
You're just exactly.
But the reality of it is that they're not real.
Yeah.
It can look real.
Right.
But, that can't actually exist.
Mary, do you see any other questions over in the chat box?
Oh, let me go back to Joanne. It's often said to go with the urge and ignore the but that seems to come after it. Then I think, well, maybe I don't really want to do the urge. Anyway, if I choose the nap, then it's proof that I didn't want to do the urge idea. Maybe just at that time, I think that there's a lot of judgment going on there. And I think what Terry was saying was really right on, which is that there's no right or wrong, good, bad, better, worse here. There is nothing that can be graded. This can't be graded. You don't earn an A one day and an F the next day.
I know when yeah, it's like I know when I stop with the whole commentary around what I should be doing and what I want to do and how just they aren't matching up, and my thoughts about all that. I certainly feel a lot more the sense of wanting to do things. I mean, there's a that creative impulse in the moment that's always happening. I seem to be more aware of when I'm not going into all the thoughts around what I should and shouldn't be doing. I mean, some naps are awesome. They're the most creative thing. It's like, wow, it's cool what's going on right now. Look at the dreams we create and stuff. So did you notice any other questions or comments over there, Mary?
Let me go back. Not at the moment.
Can I just say something about what I really appreciated about Joanne's comment was that what I couldn't see as the ocean before, I saw in what she said. And that came from not compartmentalizing creativity. Creativity is not in my work, it's not here. Like, I love the way you said that's creating supper. I've just made a lovely fish dish, and that was creative. And that's where that flow is always happening. I can see the ocean of that. And not compartmentalizing it means, yes, that's always flowing. And the only thing that can get in the way is the thinking. But I love that you really helped me to see the ocean of that creativity. So thank you.
Cool.
I know Mary has to leave the call now, but I'm willing to stay on for a little while longer if anybody has questions. Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you. I'll see you again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. And I'm going to be posting this video to YouTube. And hi, all of you that are catching this on a replay. And I will link to Mary's site in the comments. So do we have any other questions? I haven't been keeping up with the chat. It's not my thing to be reading over here. Do you notice anything over there, Joanne? No, nothing new. Well, do we have any other last minute comments or questions that anybody wants to talk about? Well, thank you all for joining us here on with this conversation. And if you think of anything you want to talk about or have any questions around this topic or any topic, you can reach me at terry@terryrunyan.com. Feel free to email me. I will respond to your email. And I hope you've enjoyed this talk, and I plan on doing more in the future. If it actually happens, we'll see. I mean, it might happen, it may not, we'll see. Right now it feels like it might. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to connecting with you all again soon.
Thanks very much, Terry. Thank you. Bye-bye.